Hey, what's going on, everybody? David Ellefson from Megadeth here in Fort Myers at Fort Rock.
Now, the last time we talked, you said you actually used to live in the Fort Myers area. Whereabouts did you live?
I did. I had a duplex. I had a woody on the beach, as they call it.
Like Fort Myers Beach?
Yeah, Fort Myers Beach. Yep,
nice.
Yep. And that was, I think, around 2006 or 7, somewhere in there. And I was down here. I had a group that I was working with, Temple of Brutality, that had invited me in to play in a record. And when I was down here, Sted Holland, who was in Wasp, became a good friend of mine. So
did you meet him just from like hanging out at the Beached Whale there?
No, I got invited to play on the record, so I came down here sight unseen, and that's how I came down here. And then while I was down here, I realized the real estate market was really booming, so I ended up buying a house. And of course, that was the year of Katrina and like 4 other hurricanes flying at my place.
Did you get a lot of damage?
I didn't. I escaped. I was okay.
Nice.
My place was good. But I came down here when it says I was working with the band. I used it a lot, and then but it was great. And you know, it's funny because you've got my 2 favorite baseball teams down here, the Minnesota Twins and the Red Sox. So I love it down here.
Yeah, we get all kinds of people that train in the area, and they're talking about trying to bring more in too, so that's always exciting. Definitely baseball season going on right now, favorite down here. Yeah. Even one of the rock stations in Inglewood, they always turn to baseball as soon as the game starts, and they'll just go straight from rock and roll to baseball.
My primary residence is out in Scottsdale, Arizona, so we're big on spring training out there. Of course, it's a dry heat out there, as they say, you know, a little different than here, but it's great to be here, especially playing a rock concert again and being back here, especially a lot of our friends are here. Some of our recent friends, and then longtime friends we've been doing a lot of these festivals with, like Rob Zombie and Seven Dust and stuff like that. So it's great to be down here.
Now, speaking of friends out in Arizona, I was curious, did you ever meet up with one of my distant relatives, Vincent Fournier, Alice Cooper?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. It's funny we comment because we never see each other around Phoenix, but we'll be like here or in Spain or somewhere else around the world, and we always joke we live 20 minutes from each other. We never see each other at home, but then we find ourselves backstage at a festival.
That is ironic. That's usually how it works, though, huh?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Now, you have a lot of good stuff coming up this summer, and now you had talked about before how, like, for example, today when Chris is playing with Lamb of God, and you have in, was it Tony?
Yeah, Tony
from Tampa?
Yes. Florida. Actually, it's funny, he's from Puerto Rico, and he just played at our show the other night in Puerto Rico, which is kind of a fun, I guess, hometown gig for him.
For sure.
But I think he moved out of there when he was, pretty young, but Puerto Rico native, and now a Florida native. So yeah, it's cool. He's a great death metal drummer, got great chops, so he's able to. There's a few shows where there's a conflict where Lamb of God is off in a different location for Megadeth. So, but it's great. But yeah, Chris is, he's been terrific being the new drummer in Megadeth. He's great on the record, and you see from the stage, it's really cool.
Now, you also on this new record have Kiko, who's coming in and bringing an international flavor from South America too. And I'm just curious, creatively speaking, when you go to sit down and write, is it any different from the original lineup of Megadeth? And has the process of songwriting changed at all with different members?
It's changed. Every member brings in their own influence and kind of their own color to the palette, if you will. And you definitely hear that on the Dystopia record. At the same time, there's Megadeth is Megadeth. So there's a certain core sound. Dave is the primary writer of the music, and then we all make our contributions from there. But yeah, I think on this record, a lot of the songs were written and laid out, and then as we started to put them together in the studio, there was a nice space and time for everybody to bring in their own stamp on it. And I think you definitely hear it with Kiko's guitar playing for sure, and you definitely hear it also with Chris Hadler's drumming.
Now, you had mentioned that you had teamed up with Ronnie Montrose in the past as well. And are there any other musicians out there that you would like to do projects with, or how did you originally get involved with hooking up with Ronnie?
Well, Ronnie, actually, Jimmy DeGrasso, who was drummer in Megadeth there for a few years, he called me, and it was during a period when I, was not, with Megadeth. And he had just called me up and he said, listen, we have some shows, funny enough, at the State Theater in St. Petersburg, and then with Jacksonville, Florida, and another one in New Orleans. And the St. Pete show was a headlining show with Ronnie, and then the other two he was actually supporting Def Leppard, which is funny because I grew up on Def Leppard and Ronnie, and Def Leppard loved Ronnie. I mean, this is like meeting their hero, you know, and the Def Leppard guys are standing at the side of the stage, like watching their idol, you know, on the same stage with them. I mean, it was such a cool thing to see. It was kind of three generations between Ronnie to Def Leppard to me and Jimmy, you know, but Def Leppard are one of those bands that, you know, made all of this seem reachable and possible because they were very young. You know, when I was like 15 or 16, I got the On Through the Night record, and Rick Allen, their drummer, I think was 16 at the time. So
oh, wow.
I mean, it made it, wow, this is actually attainable, you know. But yeah, I mean, I get involved in a lot of different things, and quite honestly, you know, the phone rings, like when Jimmy called me to play with Ronnie, and I played with Ronnie for, I don't know, 3-4 years, and was great. And then, you know, again, Temple Brutality thing, the phone rings, hey, can you play bass on this record for us? So I like doing those things. They're fun to do in my downtime away from Megadeth. I don't do them when we're in the middle of a cycle like we are right now. But, you know, it's great to, you know, sometimes just walk in and just be a bass player for people. It's a fun thing to do, and I think keeps my chops sharp, and I feel musically astute when I come back into work on Megadeth records. I feel like having some other experiences like that, because I didn't do that for many, many years. I mean, up until, you know, really up and through, I don't know, you know, until about 2003 or 4, I didn't really hardly do anything away from Megadeth. And I think that was good, you know, especially as one of the guys here from the beginning. So, but they're fun things to do now.
And now you were saying before, like Megadeth is Megadeth, and a lot of things hasn't changed. But when you do these side projects, creatively speaking, methodically, is there any big changes between the two? How the music comes about, as far as?
I think every band you have to walk into it and sort of you kind of get a read on, okay, who's in charge, who's the writer. Who's producing this, and what's sort of the outcome, you know, what's the goal here? And I think those are things that apply in every situation, you know. Megadeth, that vision was cast very early on. When I first met Dave back in June of 1983, you know, Dave had a real vision for this. And I saw the vision, I go, man, that is exactly what I want to do with my life. And so I was the first one to buy in, you know. I'm like, all my chips, let's go. You know? So it was sink or swim, you know. And that, you know, and I think because I did that, you know, it was for many years it was Dave and I who were the constants throughout a lot of lineup changes. But I had that vision, I saw it, I was there in the room when it was being put out there, and that really helped, you know. A lot of other things, you know, I may come into, like I played with Max Cavalera with Soulfly. He was well into his career. He was going through a lineup change. I was brought in to play on half of the Prophecy record, there again, you know, it's obviously Max's band, it's his record, but he was very casual. I said, what, would you like me to do something here? He goes, man, whatever you want. I said, I mean, chocolate or vanilla? Is there any direction? He goes, man, just do David Ellefson, do whatever you want. I'm like, awesome, okay, you know. So sometimes there's situations like that where it really is a blank canvas, and they're fun. So in my, you know, professional life, I've had a little bit of all of them, and those experiences are good. They kind of wise, you know, they give you some wisdom and get you hip to, you know, how to kind of walk into different musical situations and how to behave in them.
Yeah. Now, when you first started out, did you ever imagine yourself getting to the point where maybe there was bands that you looked up to, and was there ever a point when you looked and like realized you're as big or bigger than maybe some of the bands that you started looking out? You know? Yeah,
you know, there have been a few of those situations, and I mean, and there's some groups, you know, Iron Maiden, Kiss, and Van Halen, and these groups that. You know, they were my inspirations. I had their posters on my wall, you know, and I think the moment when I moved out to Hollywood in 1983, it was only a few days after I graduated high school. You know, I considered it a real blessing. I met Dave. You know, Dave, very much a legitimate rock star with his time with Metallica, you know, and you could just feel it from him, and he was very focused in his music and his vision, and he hasn't really changed. I mean, he's really stayed the course with that, you know, which is incredible. because we've gone through a lot of eras. You know, these festivals take me back to a time in the late 90s when this kind of new metal and modern rock and active rock radio thing was happening, and we made a record called Cryptic Writings. And it was a record that was very much Megadeth, but we were able to kind of widen our scope a little bit melodically, and with some of the songwriting topics and some of the themes were a little more kind of personal themes, and we landed right up at the top of the charts with that record. And we were, you know, headlining and invited to play a lot of these kind of festivals. So it's kind of interesting to come back, you know, like 20 years later now, and be playing some of these again. Some of our friends, like in Seven Dust, are still here, which is great to see.
I know, they've been
Rob Zombie, you know, it's great to see.
Yes.
Some of these guys have survived that. And then there's also a lot of brand new acts that are coming up. And we need new bands, man. I'm not one of these guys, as much as I come from a genre and a generation. You know, I'm not a guy who's like, we keep it old school, keep it real. It's like, that's all bullshit, man. It's like, you have to allow and inspire a new generation to come up, because otherwise you see a lot of our contemporaries, a lot of my friends are dying, you know, or they're getting illnesses that are preventing them from playing now. And if we don't inspire the next generation to come up, man, the train's going to run out of track, and that's going to be it.
Yeah. Now, the last time we had talked about when you went to Europe and you heard that classical sound of music, that had kind of inspired you putting that in Megadeth. And I definitely think of certain things, like even like Symphony of Destruction and stuff like that, where you brought in a lot of different instruments into the music. And I'm just curious, in your opinion, what's some of the more outlandish instruments that you've toyed around with, even on your own and your free time?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in Megadeth, I mean, we've had everything from sitars to the Nashville Symphony Orchestra director, which is Dan Huff's father, come in on the Cryptic Writings album, even strings on the Dystopia record. Kiko being able to play piano. I played piano years back. In fact, I wrote some stuff, actually some riffs that turned into guitar riffs on the Euthanasia record. So the piano has actually been a friend to Megadeth. I mean, the piano is an interesting instrument because to me it was very lightweight, kind of almost like a sissy instrument, you know, that I never thought had a place in metal. Yeah,
but that's the base of all percussions, right?
It's interesting with piano because then I started to take some lessons. I mean, this is many years, like mid-90s. I bought a home in Arizona, and I thought, well, I can either put in a pool table or a grand piano, so I bought a grand piano, and I sat down and I learned how to play it, and I took some lessons. And the kid who was giving me lessons, he was a young kid, he's a little protege, and he you know, or I should say a child prodigy is what he is. And it's funny, he taught me that, you know, the piano is really a percussion instrument.
It is.
You know, and when you look at it from a percussion rather than a melodic point of view, and it really opened my eyes to that. And looking at everything in octaves versus on the, you know, on the fingerboard of an instrument, you know, depending on how it's strung and the frets and everything.
Yes.
The piano is a very clear, very distinctive instrument for the rhythmic thing. So all of a sudden I had a whole new view of it, and I was writing things that would become basically riffs for even Megadeth albums. So, but again, back to Kiko, you know, he brings in this Brazilian jazz nylon string influence, and so there's just really, you know, so there's a lot of those kind of things that have been brought into Megadeth, of course. And I think probably the strangest instruments is when I played with Max Cavalera, because he's got instruments and I don't even know what the names of them are that he brought from Brazil. You know, he was into these very strange, you know, they'd have like one, to me it looked like a bow and arrow, and he's in there playing it, and it had a name, and you know, so Max is one of these artists, you know, that reaches deep inside of his very historic culture and brings in those sounds. And me being of Norwegian and, you know, European descent, you know, my ear kind of goes, I guess, a little bit to some of those things of a lot of the Northern European kind of music.
Nice. Well, I know you're kind of running short on time because you got a lot to do today here at the Fort Rock Festival in Fort Myers, Florida. Now, is there anything we did not touch on that you want to make sure we talk about? Any Anything in particular you want people to know about things coming up?
I think with Megadeth, we're just getting started on the Dystopia tour. We did the first 5 weeks and had a short little break, and now with the summer, I should say probably spring festivals that we're doing, and then we're over to Europe for 2 months and a full-blown South American tour coming up, and now I'm here to talk of the rest of the year, what that's going to look like, and it's really it's great. The new record, I think the fans right from the beginning, as soon as they do the needle drop, as you call it, on vinyl, when you drop the needle and it starts, right out of the gate, I think people were just saying, yeah, Megadeth is back. So I'm very happy about that.
Yeah. And I don't think Megadeth's really ever gone away in people's hearts.
We haven't. Thank you for saying that, because in my opinion, we've never gone away, But, I get it as a fan, first impressions are a lasting impression, and I think when you do that needle drop, the first thing you hear, it sets a tone and kind of a prejudice for the rest of the record, So I think coming out of the gate swinging with this, and then again with Kiko and Chris on board, I think it really just shows it's very robust, very tough sound on the record, and so I'm glad the fans have embraced it. It looks like it's going to be a fun year for us.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us. We really appreciate it, and you have a wonderful rest of the tour since you're just getting started.
Thanks.
All right.